Hello and welcome to the 905er podcast and our weekly Thursday 905 roundup, which today is probably going to be a little bit of a Canada roundup, but from a 905 perspective, because guess what? There's an election going on. Joel, that election. Election isn't going to happen.
I will wear that pie on my face. I still can't believe that it got called. I mean, I'm a little speechless, and that's probably a bad thing to be for a podcast host. But it's something I've been talking with anybody who wants to talk with me about this, and I'm like, why are we in an election right now? You know, and it's just this, because I myself can't figure it out. I mean, I've seen online a number of Liberal candidates. They're all kind of writing from the same playbook as you're going to see probably a lot more often during this campaign. That's how these things work, is everybody speaks from the same hymn book. But it's the Liberal Party is, the Parliament was dysfunctional and they couldn't get their agenda through, and therefore they needed to put forward a new they need to ask for a new mandate. And I kind of call hogwash on that. Because I mean, look at their track record. They went from scraping by with vaccines back in January. I mean, everybody was talking about how we weren't going to be vaccinated until 2030, and that was the conservative talking point: is, oh my God, Trudeau and the Liberals have screwed up this vaccination program, and we're going to be the only first world country without vaccines. And now we're like number one in the world, and we've outpaced the United States. We are on par to being top vaccinated. The only people who aren't vaccinated are the kind of anti-vaxxers and the vaccine hesitant. But I mean, that's a huge success story. So clearly you managed to get that to work. The Canada response benefit is still flowing out the door. Like all this stuff is happening. Like the stuff that really mattered to people, you got it done. So, to say, we can't get the rest of it done because it's a minority. Well, tough. That's what the people of Canada gave you. You make it work.
Yeah, and whose fault is it that you're trying to govern from the position of not having enough seats? Well, yeah, you didn't win enough seats. That's one part of it. But we have, in our parliamentary system, a history of coalitions. That's meant to be the way it works, that you can have coalitions. You can have formal agreements within parties to cooperate for 4 years. The Prime Minister, in his wisdom, never considered the option of sitting down with one of the other parties to work something out, it seemed to me. It also didn't really seem to occur to the opposition parties, and I'm thinking, obviously, primarily of the NDP here as the most likely candidate, to really push for that, to say, why on earth are they not trying to, if you try and govern from a position of not having enough MPs, you're always going to struggle on everything apart from confidence votes. Well, yeah, that was their choice, to then say, well, we don't have enough people to govern in a stable way and get our legislation through. Is like, it's your decision, and also your decision not to push ahead with. And I know I am the world's most boring person on this subject. Not to push ahead with voting an electoral reform after 2015. So, I mean, every election that has been held since then, I cannot help but kind of do the "I told you so" dance of, the last election should not have been as close as it was with Andrew Scheer. He was a leader who, in my opinion, and I think most of the country's opinion, was completely unqualified to be in the position he was in. And that's, there are good, well, when I say good, there are conservative politicians who have leadership potential. I do not see Andrew Scheer ever as being one of those people. He's a backbencher who got way past his level of qualification.
Well, I mean, we look at what's happening right now is like the Liberals thought they had this in the bag. They were riding high in the polls. They had the COVID track record in their favor, and they thought, okay, well, we'll pull the trigger on this election and we'll ride into a majority. And that is not what's been happening. I mean, it has been a disaster for the Liberals, if we're going to be honest here, since day one of this election. And I suspect I have a number of reasons why, and if you'll indulge me, I'll list them off. One, they thought that the other parties weren't prepared. They were prepared. They were itching. If you remember back in the springtime, they were itching for an election. They were tiptoeing around the idea of bringing down the government, and they chickened out. So they were clearly, my bet is the NDP and the Conservatives were ready. They had their platform ready to go. They had the funding. They just, for whatever reason, then they chickened out on not pulling the trigger on election, but they were ready. So day one, both parties had their platforms out fully. We got to see it, and the platforms aren't, the Conservative platform isn't that bad. I mean, there's questions I have for it, but it's not a foolhardy document. The Liberals don't have one, and that kind of brings me to my second point was, if you're going to tell the people we need to go to an election, in my mind right now, you and I have both been saying nobody wants an election. Nobody wants to deal with it. Everybody kind of wants to breathe a bit after the hell that COVID has been. And we kind of want to, now that we're all vaccinated, go out and enjoy this a bit and just take a break from it. And now we're not, now we got to talk about an election. So in my mind, the only way you could justify doing that would be to pull off a COVID-19 recovery. You need new legislation, big spending programs, kind of groundbreaking changes to the social fabric of Canada that, quite frankly, a responsible government would say, I need consent for the people. I need a new mandate, and I need it to be clear. So I'm going to go to the people and ask for a new mandate. I haven't seen that. Right now, the entire election for every party, quite frankly, has been, and this is my third point, has been a little disappointing with just the trinkles and baubles and the, we're just going to we're going to give you a tax credit for this and a tax credit for that. And it's like, does nobody remember this thing called COVID-19, this kind of global pandemic that we were all terrified of having an election in the pandemic? Nobody's talking about it so far in this election. The Liberals are not saying, hey, we're the ones who saved you from the pandemic. The Conservatives aren't talking about the enormous spending that they were afraid of back in the day. Like, for the fear that we all had about this pandemic, nobody is talking about it. And I am perplexed because we're in a pandemic. We're all feeling stressed out and whatnot, and nobody's talking about it, and everybody's acting like it's just an election as normal. And there are really fundamental issues in terms of how this country needs to reorganize itself to get out of this pandemic, get into the recovery and into a new way of life. COVID's not going away, and nobody's talking about what do we do about this going forward. None of the parties are. It's very disappointing.
Yeah. And it's the recent history of elections is very disappointing. The last election that, to my mind, was about something was 2015, and that everybody understood that it was kind of a vote for more of the same, whatever economic stability or whatever it is that people saw in Stephen Harper, and I'm trying not to bring my own biases into it. There's a vote between that and a change of direction that was personified in Justin Trudeau, and fine. That was an election that was about something. Since then, we've had the last election, which the only thing I'll say about this election so far is it's not as toxically vile as the last election was, with the exception that I don't think we had at the last election people chasing around politicians and kind of, calling them traitors and images of nooses and the rest of it, which is, the kind of modern apparatus of political discourse increasingly, it seems.
But that's
but to have an election about nothing, to say, well, we need to have this election and then not be hitting us with something really big to talk about, because I think most people are completely disinterested. Disinterest is not a good thing for centrist and progressive parties traditionally. Disinterest tends to favour conservatives. And if it's just a matter of who can write the biggest check, which is kind of what it's shaping up to at the moment, it's like each party saying, okay, this is what we're going to buy for you. Here's the bauble that we're going to put on your Christmas tree. Then that doesn't particularly do a huge amount of favours for incumbents either, because it's like, well, okay, if they're all going to give me a check, I'll take the one, it's not giving people a credible, a kind of
right.
Core thing to grasp hold of that is a reason to vote for X. And they're all equally guilty of that. I mean, I just happen to think it also, with nothing else to choose, you can choose that. Or why the hell are we having this election anyway? And that's your kind of enough of a reason to vote for someone else.
Well, that's what's shaping up to be. I think, there's definitely people are saying, you pulled a trigger on this. Now we have to deal with it. Nobody wanted it. Nobody wants to deal with it. And I think that's why you're seeing, like, the polls are not going in the Liberals' favor. I think it's a matter of people saying, we're going to punish you. It's David Peterson all over again with, hey, I'm riding high in the polls. I'm going to go get a new mandate. I'm going to get my majority. And people are finicky. And especially during the pandemic, the majority of people are sitting going, you got to give us a good reason. Like, you've got, and it can't just be, oh, we'll give you a tax credit on, on whatever. And this goes for all parties, because I haven't really seen anything that is really transformative. I'll say this much
from all of them, and I feel that there is a mood for genuine policies out there now. Like, all through the 80s and 90s, it was very much a world of how little can we get away with saying. Focus on personalities, focus on little stuff, focus on pocketbook kind of issues. Don't talk about policy because that stuff's dangerous. And I think that's the playbook we're seeing with the Liberals not releasing their platform yet. It's because, platforms, no one reads the platforms anyway. Release it as late as possible, because that means the other parties can't pick through it, find something that they don't like, and make a stink about that for the last week, so many weeks of the election. So but I feel that there is and to an extent, even the toxic nastiness is a demand for kind of better politics in a way. I know that sounds crazy, right? And I'll explain what I mean by that. But the people are sick.
No, I don't think it's crazy at all. I think you've got you got something there. I think you do.
Yeah, it's a desire for something tangible to grasp onto in politics. That is, and this is why I feel that in Ontario, I mean, I think the Ontario Liberals are probably. Oh, I don't think there's any probably about it. I know they took the decision with their leadership election to move to the right because people within the party felt that they had gone too far left with Kathleen Wynne, and therefore they got booted out, and, disaster. My feeling is almost the exact opposite, that the votes are on the left. It's a matter of where you divide those votes between the progressive parties that are out there, between the Greens to an extent, the NDP and the Liberals certainly. It's really, the Conservative vote sits there and doesn't change very much beyond % here, % there. It's a static thing. The majority of votes are firmly in the progressive camp. So to move to the right, all you're going to do is lose votes to the left, because they go, okay, these guys are abandoning me, I'm going to the NDP. And this is the same mistake Andrea Horwath actually made in 2014 with that election, where Wynne went left, Horwath went right, and Wynne won the majority. We're looking for policies these days, and sure, we don't agree about what those policies should be, but it's not a centrist world at the moment, I don't think.
If you look at the polling numbers, and there's an interesting tidbit, is that no matter where you go across all the polling companies, you'll never see the Conservatives crack 40%. They always remain in the low to mid 30s, roughly. And I think that's telling, and here's why. Over the years, the Conservatives have bled away that centrist part of their following. They have, and I want to say conservatism, not necessarily the Conservative Party, but like conservatism over the last decade or so, maybe even the last 20 years, has really bled away in my mind. That kind of that moderate, sensible edge of the party. Every party has its radical leaning members, right? The people who are just really out there, and you're like, you're dangerous, but you can deliver votes at the polls, so I guess we'll keep you in the party. But usually they're outweighed by the moderate, reasonable folks who understand the realities of the times. The Conservatives, I think, conservatism has kind of bled away the moderate edge, and conservatism has kind of been left with just these radical right-leaning folks that I think that it's leadership. The candidates themselves, the MPs who have been elected, the majority of them don't really know how to deal with them because there's no reason. They're not reasonable people per se, but they're the ones that they would now rely on to get them elected. And so and I think that itself does scare people away. They're scared. They're scared that these are the people that the MPs or MPPs, after they're elected, they're the ones that they listen to. They don't listen to the everyday folk. They're the ones that show up at the conventions, that show up. They scare the rest of us, and they scare the rest of us away. And so the rest of us are kind of drifting towards the Liberals and the NDP. And I'm going to throw in the Green Party, but they're a mess right now, so maybe they're not as effective. But you're right. The rest of us are saying, well, what do the other parties have to say? And you're right. They're all operating from the old playbook of, underperform, over deliver. Or sorry, I get that backwards. Undersell, overperform. Right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of what that used to be the mantra. I don't think people are satisfied with that anymore, especially not with COVID. Those of us who got the vaccines, those of us who sheltered in place for the last 2 years, we get the seriousness of it, and we understand. You ask any small business owner, like there's massive concern about how do we get this economy back up and going. What if we had, the Delta variant's the talk right now. What comes after the Delta variant? The Gamma variant, or what else is out there? And the question is like, how do we protect ourselves, and how do we protect our economy and our livelihood and whatnot? And there doesn't seem to be an answer from any party on this. I think that's why we're not seeing this massive flex. We're going to give the Liberals the return because they deserve it. It's no, what's the next step? You got us the vaccine. You got us through the dark times, but we know there's more to come. So what's the plan to deal with it? And that's what to me is the opening that no party is willing to step up to the microphone and say, here's my plan to get us through what's next to come.
I want to mention two other quick things, and then also going to mention to everybody what we're going to be trying to do during this election. My initial feeling was almost, let's ignore it, because I'm not sure I'm that excited about it, let alone our listeners. However, there's a lot of important stuff going on, and I feel, well, first things first, we've been contacting politicians from the major parties to get them on, and we're going to have interviews in the coming weeks. And, I think our promise to our listeners is that we will not be talking about, unless the front pages of the newspapers change drastically in the next few days, we won't be talking about any of the stories that are on the front pages because they're boring and they're not politics and they're not about what a government that was elected would do. So the objective is to speak to people from the parties and say, okay, what's actually in your platform? Those things that nobody actually reads. What are you promising? Why is this? Why is this better than what the other guys are promising? But let's not start the conversation from the point of view of why the other guy's thing sucks. So that's what we'll try to do. That's the aim. We've been having fun the last few days, just doing things like finding out the telephone number of a campaign office. You wouldn't believe how hard that can be.
Oh my God.
Finding out an email address, how difficult that can be. I mean, what kind of democracy are we living in when campaigns don't advertise their bloody phone numbers? I mean, for goodness sake. I just don't, I do not phone understand numbers. That one.
Just a sure.
Well, welcome back after a technical snafu with Burlington's excellent broadband service, which we're going to do an episode on at some point because it drives us crazy.
See, now that's an election issue that no one is talking about. Well, the Conservatives kind of dropped a bit of that in their platform, but internet service, especially after the pandemic, you think everybody doing video calls and Zoom calling from home, whatever that is, wow, we are really underserviced in this country for internet usage. This should be a top priority, a top infrastructure project to spur economic development. But nope, nobody's talking about that.
And is anybody talking about anything really? I mean, no. Housing was a kind of there was a blip on the affordable housing meter. We've done an episode on that, and we're going to ask candidates when we can get them about that. And I say let's just say we're hoping to have candidates from all three parties. Not sure we'll get them from the three major parties, but we shall see.
Well, that's what we were talking about before the snafu, is how hard it has been to find the contacts for the parties. And you know what? I'm going to name them, quite frankly, the Liberal and the NDP candidates in the 905. Prior to when the election was called, I went off and said, I'm going to create a cheat sheet of every campaign's contact email and phone number should we need to get in touch with one for a story idea. And yeah, the NDP and the Liberals, they might have their candidates listed, but man, their contact information is hard to find, which is outrageous when you think about it.
And from the campaigns that you and I were involved in, I mean, it seemed like 101, the first thing we did, you get your campaign office, you get
phones in the email,
and you want people to call those phone numbers, because people, it's not like you just get angry people shouting at you. You get a little bit of that. But actually, any election I've been involved in, even in the really kind of, the last days of the Wynne government where things were not going well, there was very little shouting involved. People just don't call at all. That's how you know you're going to lose. So I don't get this. This is it seems like, I don't know if it's a new thing or it's like, and not even to have an email address.
It boggles my mind that I don't know. I'm nothing about this election is, I'm like, it's not turning me on. I'm not jazzed about this at all. There's nothing about it that I'm looking and say, I'm really excited. I want to see that in action. I want to see that program enacted. I'm not seeing it. I'm not thrilled by any of the party's platforms, that I've read so far. I'm not thrilled by any of the leaders that I'm seeing right now. I find that this for the urgency to hold this election has been extremely lackluster. And it's very disappointing. Quite frankly, I'm done with the old, I think we need to take that old Jean Chrétien playbook of undersell, overdeliver, throw it out the window. Because we just had a global fucking pandemic. We need big, bold ideas to get this country back into tip-top shape.
Well, I think we
need a Marshall Plan for the post-COVID-19 recovery. We need big, ambitious thinking. And if that means we got to work with our allies in Europe or in the States and whomever, so be it. But let's get thinking big again in this country. Yeah. Let's be bold. Let's be visionary.
And I think the country is ready for discussion on things like basic income. I'm trying to think of other ones now, but basic income is one that springs into my mind right away. A discussion about a serious reconciliation with the First Nations. Silence about that. We're still digging up the bodies, and yet this election is suddenly the First Nations don't seem to be an issue anymore as far as any of the parties are concerned. Unless something comes out soon, and I will give them a chance to change direction. But all I can see when I look at what the politicians are doing is this is why the other guys suck, and I find it so boring. And I actually, my recollection is, again, I'm talking about a party I volunteered for, so I was highly biased, sure, whatever. But one of the things that impressed me about the party that I did volunteer for when they were in government was that they refused to go negative because they felt it kind of took them as the incumbents down to the level of the opposition. So it's like, the old cliche, actually, Tony Blair, who I'm not a huge fan of, to say the least, used to say that, it's the job of the opposition to look like a government in waiting and not like a pressure group. Now, we've got three parties all pretending to be a pressure group right now and not looking like a party in waiting, even the one that actually, government in waiting, sorry, even the one that actually is a government. And it's just hugely, there should be that look of gravitas that makes you look at the leader or whoever and think, yeah, I can envisage that person being prime minister. They are working on a level that invites some kind of respect, even if I don't love everything about them or whatever. And it's just not coming through yet. And again, so sure, if, say, for instance, picking at random, the Liberals, brought out a policy on basic income and were bold about it and said, we're going to have a national basic income strategy. You're going to lose a bunch of votes in certain parts of the country, but you're going to win a bunch of votes in certain other parts. And, we've talked long before about how basically elections have been won and lost in the 905 in the last 5-10 years quite often. You're not going to pick up, let's face it, Alberta's already a lost cause. Again, because of our electoral system, there are actually plenty of progressive voters in Alberta. They just don't count because of the way the vote is structured out there. But so who cares about the fact Alberta would hate the idea of a basic income when you're picking up votes in Quebec or you're picking up votes in the 905 region, which you would. It's showing that you've got the ideas and the intellectual capacity to actually have a bit of a vision is really important.
Stop treating us like children, like we can't handle this stuff. It's kind of what it comes down to me is like, why are we being spoon fed stuff that is, we kind of like to say, that's nice. It's nice to have, but I want a vision. I don't want like the social housing issue that we talked about this week with Mike Moffat, and it's an important one that we do need to talk about. But as we covered in that, we can't just focus. Like the federal government itself is not going to solve it. We need a kind of a cohesive province has to be brought in and have a plan to solve this, and it does need to be solved because it's a huge issue. But the other thing that we've talked about is how interconnected all this stuff is. Like funding for transit and infrastructure, the fact that we have shoddy internet services in this country. It's not so much a kind of a cute folksy, that's Canada for you. Like this is actually going to hamper our economic advantage in the next decade if we can't get this stuff sorted out. If we can't figure out the fact that people now want to work from home, but they also don't want their internet to crap out because, Cogeco or Rogers or Bell or whomever didn't decide to upgrade their lines. And this is definitely going to be something like it's something that we like. This is the stuff that we need to start talking about in this country. This is a 21st century issue that, quite frankly, like we're dealing with yesterday's problems with this stuff. In a lot of cases, I find with the election, we're not looking forward. We're still trying to figure out how to solve the problem that we were going to solve 10 years ago.
Well, and I think, I've noticed, again, I'm talking about the Liberals a lot because they're the incumbent, not because we have any bias in any particular direction. I mean, I think everybody knows we're progressively minded, but apart from that, it's all up for grabs and will be as tough to every party. And actually, I'll also say that the one party we spoke to actually did have a telephone number and got back to us very quickly, was a Conservative Party. There may be other problems that mean we don't end up speaking to them, but that's for another day.
If by some chance someone in the Conservative Party headquarters hears this and has a change of heart, by all means, get in touch with us, info@905er.ca. We would love to talk to you guys.
Yeah, and really, honestly, we would. And the ability to talk to you would engender so much respect that it would probably be in some kind of interest because, running and hiding doesn't. And to an extent, we've kind of said that all three parties are a little bit guilty of that. Now, we're going to have candidates on. It just sometimes seems a little bit harder than it should have been. Anyway, but, what we were talking about is, well, with the Liberals, that they're dragging themselves down to the level of the opposition by just going negative against it, basically trying to, if every election the Liberals, because it tends to be them at the moment, go out and basically say, hey, look at the Tories, aren't they scary? And I understand the temptation of that, believe me. And it's been a successful route for them. But I think at elections like this one, particularly when you're the ones who kind of put us into this mess in the first place anyway, you've got to have more than that. You can't just go, hey, look at the Tories, they're scary. Because, God knows Andrew Scheer scared the bejesus out of me. Erin O'Toole is not quite the same kind of person. I don't know. I would still say that party scares the bejesus out of me. But
Aaron O'Toole strikes me as a very reasonable, decent person. He himself doesn't. I don't have any. I don't look at him. I get the heebie-jeebies. But I do question that. You're right. His party. I get. There are a number of members in that party that I look at and say, does Aaron have the gumption to kind of step up to you and say, nope, you're not getting your way today. I don't know.
The other thing I don't understand is where are the Liberals talking about track record? Because there are things they could point to, and actually COVID is probably the biggest one. And they can point to, hey, look what a mess the province has made of this. We didn't. We did what we could do. We've talked about that frequently. We've had people on who completely unprompted, we weren't looking for any particular point of view on this. People who are not traditionally associated with politics, not necessarily liberal or progressive, who said, thank God for the government during COVID. More than one person, like 2 or 3 people said that. And they're not running on that.
Just been that's what I don't understand is, like, why not, if you're going to call an election, why not run the fact that you say, hey, we saved you from COVID. Like that's your campaign right there, right? We saved you from COVID. These guys would have had you, begging for handouts because they didn't want a debt, which, by the way, seems to have gone completely out the window in terms of the Conservative plan. Like I don't understand this. They're saying they're all about fiscal responsibility, and it's kind of gone out the window with this campaign. I think.
I think all 3 parties are trying to write the biggest check to an extent, and I think we should be drawing this to a close soon, probably. But I find it bizarre that, well, let's put it this way: I don't think that being the party that points at the Conservatives and says "be afraid" is enough at this election. You can say that, but you've got to have a lot more in your back pocket as well, and it better not just be a checkbook.
Yeah.
It's got to be some bloody ideas. And that's what's lacking, and was lacking in the last election too. And for a government that hasn't been around that long, it had 1 full term and 1 full term and a half term. That's it. To be kind of running with no real ideas that really stand out to me. Now, this is going to be tough to hear for people that I volunteer with. I'm sorry if any of you are listening. But it's kind of the truth. And all we're saying is, I'm saying this to the NDP too, and saying it to the Conservatives as well, and certainly the Greens. It's like, come up with better. Do better than this. We think you should be doing better, and we think it would really be in your interest, all of you, to do better than this, and to actually start talking about policies and not this, finger-pointing nonsense that just dominates everything now.
Well, let's leave it at that for this week. There's going to be plenty more to talk about in the days and weeks ahead. Stay tuned and make sure that you like and subscribe to the 905er, because we're going to be just focusing on, it looks like, this federal election for the next couple of weeks.
Thanks, everybody.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns, or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.
looking to make the most out of this life and optimize your personal wellness? Then check out the Natural Man Podcast. Join me, host Mike C., as we explore all areas of human wellness, physical, mental, and emotional. Learn strategies to optimize your own well-being and be in the driver's seat of your own health. Remember, your doctor works for you. Learn biohacks, neurohacks, ways to improve sleep, and ways to optimize your body and your mind. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, the Fountain app, and at naturalmanpodcast.com.